Hello, my name's Dale Hyatt. I'm a member of the Poultry Science Department at Texas A&M the past 34 years. I'm also the undergraduate lecturer. I teach the freshman class. And what I'd like to do today is talk to you a little bit about the history and scope of our poultry industry and some of the opportunities for people that are interested in a career in poultry science and the poultry industry. You know, back in the early 1900s, we really had no poultry industry. Everything was done on a backyard flock basis, none of the big companies like you have today. And chicken meat was pretty much a byproduct of the egg-laying industry. But that changed, and let me kind of take you through those changes. Meat was very expensive in the early part of the 1900s. You notice Herbert Hoover here, one of his campaign was a chicken in every pot, and that's not really so impressive today. But back then, it was the high-dollar meat because, again, it was more or less a byproduct of the egg industry and was a special occasion type thing only. But again, that changed as we started seeing these companies form and the vertical integration, which I'll explain in a minute. Give you an idea, I want to tell you a little story about how this thing kind of kicked off. As we went into World War II, we saw a little bit more of a movement of people moving into a more urban environment, looking for retail products, and some of them were looking for chicken meat. Somewhere in the 1930s, there was a lady by the name of Mrs. Steele, and Sears and Roebuck had just come out with their farm and ranch catalog, and she noticed she could buy replacement laying hens for her flock delivered by mail to her house from Sears and Roebuck. So she shook some money out of the cookie jar. This was just a poor farm family. And bought 50, and they accidentally sent her 500. And they let her keep them, so she fed them out, and lo and behold, about 16 weeks later, an old rickety wagon with pulling some coops behind it came through and was stopping at different areas and stuff along the East Coast, asking feed store owners or gas station owners, say, you know anybody that's selling chicken? I'm buying all I can get my hands on. Make a long story short, she sold about 75% of them for 54 cents a pound, which was a lot of money then, and it's not too bad today. Word spread, everybody started wanting to get into this money aspect. They didn't really look at chickens as such an income source. We saw it spread through the central United States where the grain belt is, where we have lots of cereal grains for chickens. Later, this kind of shifted down in the south and southeast after we got good trucking facilities and what have you for a more temperate climate for brooding. And that's kind of one story of many that got this thing started into the big mega industry that we have today. Actually, if you go to Delmarva, Maryland today, that's where Mrs. Steele's farm was, there's a Tyson plant that has a statue of her out front and telling that story. And that's one of the largest areas in the United States for broiler production to this day, thanks to Mrs. Steele. Just kind of a quaint little story there for you. But it wasn't until we got into the late or mid to late 1900s that we saw the formation of these big companies, and we went into vertical integration. And vertical integration is what put us on the map. And let me explain that to you. Before I get to that, let me also point out that up until that point, we were focusing on what we call the dual-purpose chickens. The pioneers brought some with them, the Sussex and the big broilers and what have you that they had worked with, and they brought them, and then they were still keying on the dual-purpose bird. Dual-purpose meaning that they're somewhat good for meat and eggs, but we changed off of that when we got to the mid to late 1900s, and we did just like the cattle people do. We had one line for meat and one line for eggs, like they have one line for meat and one line for milk, to be more efficient. So that's why we have the white leghorn for the laying hen now if we're doing white-shelled eggs, and the Cornish Rock Cross for our broilers. We specialize for their market purpose, which wasn't done until, like I said, the mid-1900s. One line, again, like I said, and they don't cross market lines. You know, actually the male that's hatched off the land birds are immediately euthanized at hatch because they won't make meat, and of course they won't lay eggs. That's how specialized they are for their market purpose. And there's just an example of two chicks that looked identical 42 days prior to this picture being taken. And that one on the right's designed for egg production. Very slim. It's designed that way so that we get the most production out of eggs and not meat. Whereas the one on the left, of course, would be the best one for eating. You can see when dressed how different they are. This is genetic selection for that market purpose. So anyway, what's part of our specialization was they decided to go, they found out that the consumer in this country preferred breast meat, so they were looking for a large frame bird and then one with a big breast, and they crossed them, and that's why today, if you go to some hatcheries and you want to buy a broiler production bird, they'll call it the Cornish Rock Cross or the Rock Cornish Cross. Vertical integration is what built these companies, and it's what made this meat affordable. In the past, all these sections you see here, somebody owned and operated them, and there's a whole bunch of middlemen in there. You've got a hatchery, you've got a feed mill, you've got a processing plant, you've got a breeder, et cetera, and so on. Each one of those owners got their cut. Time we got to the end of the line, we had some pretty expensive meat. What happened was these companies like Pilgrim's Pride, Tyson Foods, Sanderson Farms, they bought up all these aspects and put them under one global ownership. By doing that, they cut out all these middlemen, and that's why chicken meat and turkey meat is some of the most affordable meat that you can find at the grocery store today. Genetic selection, we've made all our progress really through genetic selection. There's a lot of rumors out there that the poultry industry uses steroids or hormones, and that is simply not true. It's all through genetic selection because we can produce so many numbers in a short period of time to select from as compared to the red meats. We've done a lot of improvements as far as feeding them the correct nutritional diets with computer formulation programs to maximize their genetic potential. We've made a lot of progress in different types of housing and automated equipment. All this came together to make a really affordable product that just put them on the map and built these very big companies. Some changes in the industry. Back at the turn of the century, the last century, excuse me, not this one, you know, an average laying hen would lay 100 eggs a year. Today it's over 300. That's through genetic selection, just keying on production. And then, of course, the per capita consumption on chicken meat has gone up so high that it's just remarkable how many birds are processed in this country on an annual basis. There's some per capita consumption, a graph that probably needs to be updated a little bit, but you notice chicken meat has skyrocketed since the 80s. And that's basically for three different reasons. Number one, it's so affordable due to vertical integration. Number two, every fast food place you see today, and there's a lot of them, sell chicken something. That wasn't the way it was in the past. And the health craze that the American people have seemed to picked up starting in the mid-'80s has really put us on the map and built these really large companies. So that's kind of broilers in a nutshell. I'm going to talk about job opportunities in a minute. Turkeys, they have a very similar past. The turkeys were actually developed from the wild turkey that are native to North America. Mainly the eastern is what contributed most of the genetics towards the bird we use today. We rear turkeys a little bit different than we do broilers. We raise them sexes separate because we do get them to a market age to where they have the hormonal instincts to reproduce, and the tom can tread the hen and cause carcass damage. We usually raise them in two stages because there's such a variation in size from day-old hatch to market age. They'll go from 90 grams to 40 pounds, and so we have to go in with heavier equipment during the last stage of their life. And we raise them 2 or 3 times as long as we do broilers. We also have a pretty dynamic game bird market. These aren't so much the big vertically integrated. These are more individual niche markets by entrepreneurs, but there has been markets for them. I want to talk to you a little bit now about available jobs. One thing I want to point out, Texas A&M has the largest poultry science department in the United States, and we're proud of that. And our graduates are really sought after. We can't supply enough graduates to supply the demand. We boast 100% job placement of all our graduates, and it's been that way since I graduated, and that was a long time ago. Some of the different areas, there's live production. You can be a broiler flock supervisor, which I did with turkey flocks when I first graduated. Processing supervisors, quality control specialists, HACCP specialists, all the regulatory requirements that the government has, marketing specialists, and then there are tons of what we'd call affiliated or sister type careers, which are pharmaceuticals, poultry equipment, automation, hatchery automation and hatchery improvements, incubators, et cetera, and so on. You put all that together, there are a bunch of jobs out there that are looking for people, and they love the A&M graduates because our graduates have done very well in the field. Of course, I'm somewhat biased. I'm going to encourage you to go that way, but there's a lot of other good departments out there also. And but I can tell you one thing. If you go through the poultry science program, you will have job offers. We cannot supply enough to meet the demand, and that's a pretty neat thing. And that's what I wanted to get across here, a little bit about the history of the industry, where it's been going, and it's still growing like mad, how it got there, and some of the job opportunities. Thank you.